They left her for dead. A police cruiser burning in the frozen woods, a young officer bleeding out alone, forgotten, no backup coming. No one would have found her in time. But fate sent a single father and his loyal German shepherd into that darkness. He was nobody's hero, just a man broken by life, with a dog who refused to give up. What happened next will challenge everything you believe about courage, loyalty, and family. If you believe a dog's love can save a life, if you believe strangers can become family, hit that subscribe button. Before we begin, tell me where you're watching from. Drop your country in the comments. Let's see how far hope can travel tonight. Winter had come early to Brattleboro, Vermont, a small town stitched together by snow-draped pines, sagging porches, and roads that wound like ribbons through the quiet countryside. The December sun was already a memory, fading behind pewter clouds, and a pale, powdery snow fell in slow motion, muffling the world. Streetlights glowed soft and gold against the dusk, while the air tasted of wood smoke, pine sap, and the hush of something waiting. Ethan Walker, a man built from the ordinary, moved through the gray twilight with a slowness learned from sorrow. At 43, Ethan wore his life in the soft lines bracketing his blue eyes, the stoop of his broad shoulders, and the fraying edges of his workman's jacket. He was tall, weathered, but not broken, hair gone prematurely silver at the temples, hands strong but gentle hands that once fixed engines and cradled his baby daughter before fate swept her and her mother away in a winter accident years ago. Since then, Brattleboro had changed for him. The world had too. But some men keep walking, not because hope calls, but because routine demands it. And so, every evening after the mills closed, after the last odd job faded, Ethan kept his ritual boots crunching in the snow, a silent prayer in every step, accompanied by the only soul who understood his language of silence, a German shepherd named Rusty. Rusty was nearly 7 now, his thick coat the deep, classic black and tan of his breed, but time and hardship had salted his muzzle with gray. One ear stood proudly while the other, notched from an old fight, tilted a little, his own mark of battles survived. His amber eyes held a wild wisdom, loyal but haunted, and he moved with the wary, careful gait of a creature who'd known hunger and cold. Rusty was not always called Rusty. When Ethan first found him, if you could call it finding, more like being chosen, the dog was little more than a ragged stray, ribs pressing against his skin, limping through the alley behind the shut-down Fairview Toolworks. It was the last day Ethan ever clocked out of that factory, pink slip in his coat pocket, heart as empty as his hands. He'd tossed his lunch, the sandwich he could no longer eat, toward the trembling animal. The dog had snatched it with a surprising gentleness, then followed him home as if it was the only path left. It was weeks before the dog allowed Ethan to touch him, months before trust replaced fear. One evening, as they sat together in the small shed behind Ethan's rented house, a shaft of sunset hit the dog's fur, making his coat gleam copper red. Ethan, lost in memory, had murmured, "You look like the old pickup Dad used to drive, rusty and tough, been through hell, but still running." The name stuck, less for the color than for the stubbornness, the refusal to quit. Rusty, survivor, companion, secret keeper. In the years since, the two had grown into a rhythm-quiet walks, long silences, moments of unspoken comfort. For Ethan, Rusty was not a pet. He was proof that broken things could mend, given patience and kindness. Tonight, their path led them from the edge of town into the tangled woods behind Foster Road, a wilderness both men and dogs respected, especially in winter. Ethan breathed in the hush, watching Rusty bound ahead, nose down, tail wagging with tentative joy. If Ethan had learned anything from loss, it was that hope often arrived in the simplest forms: the warmth of a dog's side, the pattern of breath and paw prints in fresh snow, the way a creature could love you for who you were, not for what you'd lost. The wind rose, rattling the bare branches, as Ethan and Rusty made their way through the gathering gloom. Sometimes Ethan spoke aloud, not to fill the silence, but to let Rusty know he was listening. "You ever wonder, boy," he said softly, "if anyone would notice if we didn't come back?" Rusty cocked his head, one ear up, the other flopped. He understood the music, if not the words. The air shifted. Rusty stopped, nose twitching, every muscle taut. A faint, acrid scent, wrong, unnatural cut through the clean sharpness of snow. Ethan saw the dog's hackles lift, felt the tension run up the leash and into his own spine. Rusty let out a low, warning whine, then started forward, paws silent as a shadow over the drifts. Ethan followed, senses sharpening, heart quickening with an old fear, one that had nothing to do with wild animals or getting lost. The woods closed around them, snow falling harder now, clinging to coats and lashes. The world narrowed to a tunnel of breath and scent, the sound of Ethan's boots and Rusty's eager, urgent movement ahead. There, a flash of something metallic through the trees, the stuttering orange glow of fire against blue twilight. Ethan's breath caught. He started to run. The scene was sudden, jarring. A police cruiser skewed off the narrow road, the front end crumpled against a tree. Flames licked out from under the hood, feeding on leaking oil. The stench of burning plastic and gasoline stung Ethan's eyes. "Stay back, Rusty," he commanded, voice shaking. But the dog had already crept forward, nose pressed to the snow, circling the wreck. Ethan peered through the shattered window. In the flicker of flames, he saw a figure slumped behind the wheel, a woman in uniform, blood staining her shoulder, face ghostly pale in the firelight. She wasn't moving. For a split second, Ethan froze, memories flashing. The night he lost his own family to ice and bad luck. Then Rusty barked a sharp, urgent sound that snapped Ethan back to the moment. "Okay, buddy. We help her. We try." Ethan pulled at the door, the handle slick with blood and melting ice. It gave way with a screech. Smoke billowed out and Ethan coughed, reaching inside. He felt the woman's pulse weak, but there. With Rusty standing guard, Ethan dragged the officer out, cradling her against the bitter cold, his breath coming in sobs. He wrapped his coat around her, pressed a trembling hand to her wound. Rusty pressed in close, lying alongside the woman, sharing what little warmth he had. For a moment, the three of them formed a huddle, lost, fragile, but not alone. The fire grew, snapping at the night. Ethan reached into the car, fumbling for the police radio. As the wind howled and snow whirled around them, Ethan sent out a desperate call for help, his voice lost in static, but Rusty's loyal gaze steadied him. They would not leave this stranger behind, not tonight. The world narrowed to flame and panic. Ethan's breath fogged in the frigid air as he ran to the wreck, every muscle bracing against the night's raw violence. The police cruiser's front was crumpled around an ancient maple, hood buckling and flames blooming out beneath, hungry and hot, the smell of burning oil and plastic biting at his nose. For a second, all Ethan could see were shadows, his own, thrown long and frantic, and the silhouette of Rusty darting in and out of firelight, barking sharp and insistent, not just a warning, but a call for help that pierced the darkness. Inside, slumped over the steering wheel, was the body of a woman. She looked impossibly young beneath her police cap, a scattering of auburn hair loose against her cheek, pale skin splattered with blood. The navy blue of her uniform was darkened with a wide, soaking patch at the shoulder, her left arm pinned awkwardly by the seatbelt. Her face, dusted with freckles, was white as wax. The world held its breath. Ethan's hands, strong from years of turning wrenches and fixing broken machines, trembled as he tried the passenger side door locked, jammed, useless. He rounded the burning hood, jacket sleeves scorching, and yanked the driver's door, praying it would give. It wouldn't. "Hold on," he muttered. The flames crackled, heat growing fierce. In that chaos, an old memory struck him. The day, years ago at Fairview Tool Works, when the hydraulic press failed and a man named Charlie was pinned screaming beneath it. That day, Ethan's body had moved before his mind, wrestling steel and pain, saving a life by instinct. Since then, so many things had broken in him, but the part that acted, the part that couldn't look away, remained. He braced himself and kicked at the lower frame with all his strength. The door crumpled with a metallic groan, finally wrenching open. Smoke poured out, thick and suffocating. "Hey, hey, can you hear me?" he called, reaching through the haze to touch the woman's neck. Her pulse fluttered, faint but present. "Don't quit on me now," he whispered. His voice, cracked and gruff, was gentler than he'd intended. Rusty paced beside him, barking at the sky as if demanding witnesses, his amber eyes wild and wide. The fire licked dangerously close to the open door. Ethan fumbled for the seatbelt buckle, found it jammed, and with desperate effort worked his pocket knife between the webbing and seat, sawing through. The woman slipped forward, slumping into his arms, heavier than she looked, boots scraping against the scorched mat. The flames hissed and spat. Ethan clutched her, dragged her backward into the cold, every breath tearing at his chest. For a moment, his legs threatened to buckle. He thought of Charlie's wide, panicked eyes, the factory's alarm blaring, how afterward nobody had called Ethan a hero, just lucky. He wasn't lucky now. He was necessary. When they reached the snow, Ethan collapsed to his knees, the woman's head lolling against his shoulder. Rusty hovered anxiously, licking her numb fingers, tail wagging low, worried. Ethan pressed his own coat to her wounded shoulder, feeling blood soak instantly into the fabric. Her breath rasped in shallow, broken snatches. In the fire's flickering light, he saw the badge pinned to her chest, Bennett, and beneath it, a silver locket, its chain tangled with blood and hair. Ethan murmured, "Stay with me, Officer Bennett. Don't check out yet." The woman's eyelids fluttered. A small, painful sound escaped her lips. Rusty edged closer, whining softly, and Ethan felt the dog's warmth against his thigh. He shivered, more from nerves than cold. He remembered the first time he'd rescued anything, a baby sparrow fallen from its nest, back when he was a boy on his parents' struggling farm. He had watched it breathe in his cupped hands, so fragile, so real. He'd learned that day that life could be lost in a second, and that sometimes all you could do was refuse to let go. Above them, the cruiser flared brighter, glass cracking in the heat. Ethan glanced around. Nothing but silent trees and the distant, unfeeling lights of Brattleboro. He shrugged off his jacket entirely, wrapping it around the officer's body, then tore his shirt into strips, binding her wound as tightly as he dared. His fingers slipped in blood, hands shaking. "Help's coming," he lied, voice trembling. "You just hang in there." But he had no way to call for help. The woman's radio had been smashed in the crash, its wires tangled with shattered plastic. Ethan cursed under his breath, trying not to panic. He had been here before, waiting for help that didn't come. Not tonight. He couldn't lose another soul. Rusty barked sharply, spinning toward the woods, as if daring the night itself to intervene. The dog's body was rigid, hackles up, every sense focused outward. Ethan, desperate, looked for any sign of headlights, any flicker of hope on the icy road beyond the trees. Instead, all he saw were shadows. The wind carried the distant hum of the highway, but no rescue, no one rushing to save them. He pressed closer to the woman, willing his own warmth into her. In the darkness, his mind slipped between past and present. He thought of his daughter, of the weight of her in his arms. He thought of his old crew at the plant, men and women he'd trusted with his life, now scattered like dust in the economic wind. Why had he never called any of them? Why had no one called him? A shudder ran through the woman. Her eyes opened a crack, unfocused and wild. "Mom?" she whispered, voice barely more than a sigh. "No," Ethan said gently, "but I'm here. I've got you." He squeezed her hand, held tight even as she slipped back into unconsciousness. The fire raged higher, an orange beacon in the night. Ethan glanced at Rusty. The dog, ever alert, nuzzled closer, pressing his body against the woman's side, lending his heat. "Good boy," Ethan murmured. "We're not alone." Not tonight. For the first time in years, Ethan felt the flicker of purpose, raw and fierce, burning through the fear and helplessness. They waited. Time stretched and shivered, punctuated by the crack of burning metal and the endless silence of snow. Ethan found himself talking to the woman, to Rusty, to the night. He told stories of old cars and simpler winters, of kindness received and debts unpaid. He told her, "You're going to make it. There's more waiting for you. You have to see the sunrise tomorrow." Rusty listened, head on Ethan's knee, eyes never leaving the horizon. Finally, in the far-off dark, a faint red glow appeared. Sirens. Rescue. Rusty leapt up, barking frantically, running circles in the snow to flag them down. As the emergency vehicles pulled in, Ethan slumped with relief, his strength spent. Paramedics, a woman with brown braids and a man with a sharp, tired face, jumped from the ambulance. The woman, Nurse Olivia Lane, was small but moved with practiced confidence, her hands steady, eyes sharp and sympathetic. She had grown up in Brattleboro, known for her soft voice and gentle humor, the sort of person people trusted without knowing why. The man, Tony Carr, looked older than his 35 years, jaw shadowed with stubble, expression wary, a man who'd seen too many nights like this. "What happened?" Olivia asked, kneeling at Ethan's side, inspecting the officer's wounds. Ethan tried to explain, his voice raw, words tumbling over each other. Olivia nodded, eyes flicking over the bandages, then shot Tony a quick look. "You did good," she told Ethan. "We'll take it from here." Tony and Olivia worked in swift silence, sliding a board beneath Officer Bennett, lifting her onto a stretcher. Rusty followed anxiously, tail low, until Olivia paused and gave him a grateful scratch behind the ear. "You too, hero." Firefighters arrived next, a burly man named Wade in heavy gear, his helmet scuffed, beard ice-flecked, moving to douse the burning car. Wade's booming voice was a comfort in the cold. "Lucky you found her," he told Ethan, clapping him on the shoulder. "Real lucky." As the ambulance doors slammed shut, Ethan stood in the glow of flashing lights, numb but upright. Rusty pressed against his leg, whined softly. Wade watched Ethan for a moment, then offered his thermos. "Coffee?" Ethan took it, hands shaking. "Thank you." The world spun quietly around them, firemen shouting, medics working, lights strobing across the snow. In that swirl, Ethan felt old wounds ache, but also the distant, defiant warmth of hope. Rusty, for his part, watched the ambulance disappear down the road, then looked up at Ethan, eyes full of questions only dogs could ask. Ethan knelt beside him, hands buried in Rusty's fur. "We did right, boy. No matter what." They stood together in the snow, two survivors, and now, maybe, a rescuer too. Ethan's breath steamed in the bitter air as he knelt in the trampled snow beside the battered cruiser, the forest crowding close and silent. His hands shook as he fumbled with the police radio, but memory and desperation steadied him. He'd once spent long shifts fixing old radios in the mill, and now his fingers recalled the weight and shape of wires and dials. Static crackled in his ear as he pressed the call button, voice rough. "There's been an accident. Officer down, North Woods, near Foster Road. Please, send help now." The reply was garbled, thin through the wind, but he caught enough to know help was on its way. All he could do now was wait, with the fire's heat dying behind him and the cold pressing in. Rusty paced circles in the snow, ears high, hackles raised, body alert to every movement. The dog's coat, dusted white, stood out in the dimness, a shadow in motion, both sentinel and comfort. Ethan watched him, grateful for the presence of another heartbeat in the icy dark. The only sounds were the distant hiss of fire and the crunch of paws on frost. As the minutes crawled by, Ethan's mind ran wild. Would they come fast enough? Would the woman survive? Was there something he should be doing? He knelt beside the officer, her face still, skin losing warmth, and checked the bandage, grateful she was breathing, if only barely. The quiet was nearly absolute, the forest holding its secrets. Suddenly, Rusty's attention snapped to a patch of snow near the rear of the car. He whined, pawing furiously. Curious, Ethan staggered to his feet and trudged over, boots sinking deep. The dog's nose was buried in a drift, snow flying as he dug with determination. Soon his paws hit something solid. Ethan knelt, brushing aside the powder, and found half frozen into the earth, a heavy work glove, gray fabric stained with blood not yet brown with age. Rusty continued to snuffle and paw at the ground, tail rigid, refusing to leave the spot. A little further off, beneath a cluster of frost-blackened leaves, Ethan noticed a glint of brass. He reached over, pulling free a single spent shell casing, cold and smooth in his palm. He turned it in the faint glow from the burning cruiser, heart beating faster. This was no accident, he realized. Someone else had been here, someone with blood on their hands. The snow muffled the horror, but the evidence was real, too real to ignore. As Ethan processed the scene, a flicker of movement caught the edge of his vision, deeper in the woods. He stiffened, squinting through the shifting flakes. There, half concealed behind a thick birch, stood a figure wrapped in a long brown coat and knit cap, watching silently. The stranger's posture was cautious, his face obscured by the shadow and distance, but the way he held himself suggested wariness and purpose. Ethan's blood went cold. For a moment, the man simply watched, the faintest glint of light off a pair of glasses beneath the hat. Then, as the distant wail of sirens pierced the trees, the figure faded back into the woods, disappearing as quietly as he'd arrived. Rusty growled low in his throat, tail lashing, but did not give chase. Ethan's mind whirled. Had the stranger caused the crash? Was he watching to see if the officer died? Or was he just another lost soul, drawn by the fire and fear? He stared at the glove and the shell in his hands, knowing these would matter when the police arrived. The rescue team's arrival was sudden and noisy, red and blue lights bouncing off snow and bark, voices shouting orders, heavy boots pounding toward the scene. Among the first responders was Deputy Caleb Hayes, a square-jawed man of 38, his sandy blonde hair peeking beneath his hat, blue-gray eyes sharp and alert. Caleb's frame was broad, his movements practiced but not hurried, a man who led by quiet example. He was known in Brattleboro as reliable, a good neighbor, someone whose patience had been tempered by loss. He'd once lost a brother to an accident on these very roads. Caleb crouched beside Ethan, studying the officer and then Ethan himself, measuring urgency with calm. "You the one who called it in?" Ethan nodded, handing him the glove and the spent casing without a word. Caleb's gaze hardened, but his tone was warm. "We'll take care of her. And we'll want your statement." The medics, led by Olivia Lane, moved quickly, checking pulses, fixing IVs, sliding the woman onto a stretcher. Olivia's gloved hands were gentle but efficient, her face pinched with focus as she worked. Tony Carr hovered nearby, passing supplies and shouting updates to dispatch. Firefighters, including Wade with his now sooty beard, stamped out the last of the burning car and kept the curious townsfolk back. Rusty stayed glued to Ethan's side, eyeing the newcomers warily but standing his ground. Olivia paused long enough to ruffle his fur and smile. "Good boy. You saved a life tonight, didn't you?" she murmured, before rushing off again. As the chaos settled, Ethan let himself breathe for the first time since he'd heard Rusty's first bark. Deputy Caleb returned, his expression serious. "Did you see anyone else out here?" Ethan hesitated, recalling the shadow in the trees, and nodded. There was someone watching. Brown coat, glasses. Gone when you pulled up, Caleb's jaw clenched. "We'll check the perimeter." He motioned to a young officer Mason, slim, nervous, barely older than a college kid, with a perpetual blush on his cheeks, to sweep the woods. The scene filled with radios squawking, footprints melting into slush, the scent of burnt plastic fading beneath the stronger aroma of snow and pine. Ethan felt Rusty's head press into his palm, a silent reassurance that, for all the night's darkness, he had not faced it alone. In the rush and noise, a second shadow flickered by. Sarah Mallory, a local reporter known for her sharp tongue, dark curly hair pulled back in a practical bun, and a relentless drive to uncover the truth. She was quick, clever, and sometimes too curious for her own good, a fixture at every accident, crime, or parade in Brattleboro. She snapped a few photos from a safe distance, her eyes sweeping the scene with professional calculation, already imagining tomorrow's headline. But tonight, Ethan ignored her. He watched as Officer Bennett, her face drawn, her shoulders swaddled in makeshift bandages, was loaded into the ambulance. Olivia squeezed Ethan's arm. "We'll do everything we can," she promised, and Ethan nodded, suddenly exhausted. As the sirens faded down the long, icy road, Ethan remained surrounded by strangers, yet profoundly alone, Rusty's steady presence the only anchor in a storm of uncertainty. The evidence in his pocket felt heavy. A bloody glove, a spent casing, the memory of eyes in the woods. He turned, looking at Caleb, who offered a small, sober nod, understanding, passing wordlessly between two men who'd both lost and found things in the cold. Above them, snow continued to fall, erasing footprints, softening wounds, promising both concealment and renewal. In the silence that followed, Ethan slipped a hand beneath Rusty's collar, grateful for the warmth and the bond that, even in the darkest forest, meant he never truly faced the night alone. The hospital in Brattleboro was small but sturdy, its brick walls red against the washed-out sky and its windows glowing pale with winter's dim light. Inside, the air smelled of antiseptic and coffee left too long on the burner, a faint hush broken only by the distant beeping of monitors and the low murmur of nurses at the main desk. In one quiet corner of the second floor, Officer Maya Bennett lay unconscious in a private room, the lines of pain around her mouth softened by sedation and bandages. Her auburn hair, now tangled and matted, splayed across a hospital pillow. Her freckles had all but disappeared beneath the pallor of shock and loss of blood. Tubes and wires snaked from her arm and beneath the hospital gown, each one a slender lifeline. Maya, a woman of 27, had always been the sort who ran headlong into trouble. Tall and athletic, she was known for her stubborn jaw, clear green eyes, and an easy, infectious laugh that had once made her popular at the station. But there was steel beneath her warmth, a resilience that had been forged in family hardship, and a father's lessons about never backing down, even when the odds seemed impossible. Lately, colleagues had noticed that Maya worked later, took more risks. Some said she was trying to prove something. Others, that she was running from the ghosts of a recent failed relationship and the heavy memory of her mother's sudden death the winter before. But tonight, she was still, helpless, as snow continued to fall outside. Doctors came and went, faces tight with concern. Dr. Penelope Jew, the attending physician, a petite, meticulous woman in her early 40s with graying hair in a neat braid and calm, intelligent brown eyes, read Maya's charts in silence, lips pressed together. Penelope was known for her directness with families, her compassion with patients, and her strict, almost motherly expectations for her nurses. "She's stable," she finally told the gathered officers, "but there's real risk." It could go either way. Tonight, Ethan and Rusty visited the hospital later that evening. Ethan, still wearing the same battered coat from the accident, held a paper bag with the bloodied glove and spent casing inside. He looked tired, rough around the edges, but moved with a kind of careful gentleness. Rusty, for his part, padded beside him, fur still faintly flecked with ash and pine needles. At the nurse's desk, Ethan met Chief Morton, the head of the Brattleboro Police. Morton was nearing retirement tall, with a faded badge, a crown of white hair, and a slow, deliberate way of speaking. His dark overcoat always looked a size too big, and his hands, broad and freckled, with thick veins and blunt fingers, spoke of a lifetime working his way up from patrol. Morton's face was careworn, lined with old grief and stubborn hope. He'd lost friends to violence and seen too many cases end in silence, but he still believed in good cops, hard work, and the wisdom of animals. "Walker," Morton greeted, voice low, shaking Ethan's hand with a steady grip. "Glad you came. The medics say it's still touch and go." Ethan nodded, holding out the evidence. "Rusty found these. Out by the car. Figured they'd help." Morton turned the bag over in his hands, eyes narrowing as he inspected the items. "You've got a good nose, dog," he said, giving Rusty a rare, soft smile. Rusty's tail wagged once, almost shy. Morton motioned for Ethan to follow him down the hall to a quiet alcove. "You saw anything strange out there tonight, besides the crash?" Ethan hesitated, recalling the stranger in the woods. "There was someone else. Watching. Disappeared before the rescue team got there. Brown coat, glasses." Morton's frown deepened. "Not the first time I've heard of a stranger poking around. Brattleboro's changing. Used to know every soul in town. Now I barely recognize half the faces." He patted Ethan on the shoulder, then turned serious. "You and your dog be careful. Whoever set that up, it wasn't an amateur. I'm starting to think Maya wasn't just unlucky. If you see anything, you come straight to me. Understand?" Ethan nodded. He felt Rusty press against his leg, a reminder that he was not alone in this, whatever it was. The hours dragged. Maya remained in her room, breathing slow and shallow. The hospital grew quieter as night deepened, the snow outside thickening into drifts, muting the lights of cars passing by. Nurses rotated in and out, checking charts and vitals. At the end of the hall, a new figure appeared, a man in crisp green scrubs, a white coat, and a surgical mask. He was tall and lean, his brown hair buzzed close, blue eyes sharp and restless. No one on staff recognized him, but he moved with an air of authority, scanning his badge at the nurse's station. "Just checking on Officer Bennett," he told the night nurse, who was young, distracted, and trusted the badge. Inside Maya's room, the doctor shut the door behind him, drawing the blinds. He reached into his pocket, producing a small capped syringe filled with a cloudy amber liquid. As he leaned over Maya, Rusty waiting outside with Ethan suddenly grew agitated. His ears perked, tail stiff, a deep, guttural growl vibrating in his chest. Ethan, half dozing in a chair nearby, sat up as Rusty lunged for the closed door, barking and scratching with desperate urgency. The nurse at the desk startled, rushing over to calm the commotion. Inside the room, the doctor froze, startled by the sudden barking. His hand shook. "In the confusion, doctor." Ju arrived, drawn by the chaos. She pushed the door open just as Rusty barreled in, teeth bared, barking furiously. The man in scrubs turned, syringe in hand. Dr. Ju's eyes widened. She shouted for security. The nurse called for help as Ethan forced his way in, grabbing Rusty by the collar. The fake doctor tried to push past them but slipped on the freshly mopped floor. The syringe skittered under the bed. Morton, who'd been on his way to check Maya, stormed in, pinning the man to the ground with surprising force for his age. "You're not staff," Morton growled, wrenching the badge from the man's chest. Security arrived, cuffing the would-be assailant as doctor. Ju checked Maya. "She's stable," Ju said, voice shaky with adrenaline. The contents of the syringe, once tested, would prove to be lethal. Morton stood, catching his breath, then turned to Ethan and Rusty. "You two might have just saved her life twice in one night." Ethan, stunned, met Morton's gaze. Rusty's tail thumped against the tile, oblivious to the gravity of what he'd done. As dawn crept over Brattleboro, painting the sky a gentle pink above the snow, Maya still slept, safe for now. The staff praised Rusty as a hero. Ethan lingered in the waiting room, Morton at his side, both men drinking bitter coffee, silent but united by the knowledge that darkness had come closer than anyone wanted to believe, and that vigilance would be needed in the days to come. Sunlight sliced through the frosted hospital window, painting the world in pale gold and quiet resolve. Maya Bennett blinked awake to the soft click and whir of machines, the distant sound of rubber soles on linoleum, and the familiar ache in her shoulder. The pain was sharp, but it brought with it a fierce, stubborn clarity, the kind Maya had built her whole life around. Her green eyes flicked around the room, catching Ethan slouched in a chair by the door, his jacket balled under his head, Rusty curled loyally at his feet. Maya's first memory after the crash was the feel of Ethan's hands, rough, calloused, saving her life in the burning woods, and the dog's warm fur pressed against her, a silent comfort in the night. Dr. Penelope Ju entered quietly, her hair pulled back and her eyes intent behind slender wire frames. She examined Maya's chart, checked the bandages, and offered a tight-lipped smile. "You're lucky," Penelope said softly, "and tougher than most." As she left, Maya felt a flutter of gratitude for the calm, competent doctor who seemed to hold the chaos of the hospital together with nothing but willpower and quiet compassion. As the morning wore on, Ethan woke, blinking against the sunlight. He was still rumpled and out of place, with grease under his fingernails and worry lines cut deep into his brow, but his presence radiated steadiness. "You're awake," he said, voice rough but kind. Rusty thumped his tail, ears perking as Maya smiled. The dog came to rest his head on the edge of her bed, amber eyes bright with concern and loyalty. "Hey, hero," Maya whispered, scratching him gently. "Did you save me?" Rusty gave a little huff, pressing closer, and for the first time in days, Maya laughed, just a small sound, but genuine. Later, Chief Morton stopped by, a towering figure in his battered overcoat, bringing Maya coffee and the evidence bag Ethan had delivered. His eyes, though stern, held a quiet warmth. "I need your help piecing this together," he said, handing her the glove and shell casing. "You're the only one who's seen the pattern." Maya felt the gravity of that trust, and the isolation that came with it. She knew that Morton was a rare kind of cop, honest, patient, and loyal to his people, but exhausted by years of fighting shadows. His gruff support felt like the last anchor she had left in the department. The day passed slowly. Nurses came and went, including Olivia Lane, the petite and efficient nurse with a quick smile and a memory for small kindnesses. She helped Maya sit up, changed her IV, and brought stories of life outside the hospital. A blizzard closing schools, a neighbor's new puppy, the bakery running out of cinnamon rolls before noon. Olivia's presence lightened the air, her laughter a reminder that hope lived in ordinary things. As the hospital quieted in the afternoon, Maya's mind turned to darker places. She remembered the night a year ago when she and her old partner, Tom Martinez, a lean, dark-eyed detective with a quick wit and a knack for reading people, led the sting on a warehouse at the edge of town. The case was a big one. Guns, drugs, stolen goods, men with nothing to lose. The arrests were messy and brutal. Maya had put herself between Tom and a bullet. He'd never forgotten, and neither had the gang they'd dismantled. Some of those men had sworn revenge, and Brattleboro's shadows ran deeper than the snowdrifts. Since then, Maya had lived with a low, persistent unease. The city had changed. People watched her with guarded eyes. Some colleagues whispered about her in the halls, and her own apartment felt less and less like home. But she had never backed down. And now, staring at the evidence, the glove, the bullet, the attempted murder in her hospital bed, she knew the past had come roaring back. Ethan sensed her worry. He spoke quietly, his voice carrying a wisdom born from years of disappointment and hard-earned hope. "I don't know much about police work," he admitted, "but I know how to fix what's broken. You tell me what you need. I'll be there." He met her gaze, and for a moment, Maya felt the rare safety of being believed without question. Rusty, ever vigilant, pressed his head against her side, as if promising to protect her from the world. That afternoon, Maya asked Ethan to help her review everything she could remember. They spread the evidence on her hospital blanket: the blood-stained glove, the single shell, a blurry memory of a stranger in a brown coat and glasses. She told him about the warehouse sting, the enemies made, the death threats whispered from jailhouse phones. Ethan listened intently, turning the shell casing in his hands, eyes narrowed in thought. If someone wanted to make it look like an accident, he mused, they'd need to be close. Know your schedule. Maybe even know the hospital, too, Maya nodded. And the fake doctor, he knew where to find me, what drugs would finish the job. Outside the hospital room, Rusty's ears pricked. He padded to the door, nose twitching, eyes alert. Through the glass, he watched a figure linger at the end of the hallway, a man with a messenger bag and a careful, too casual stride, dark hair swept back, glasses reflecting the fluorescent lights. The man seemed to be texting, but every so often his gaze flicked toward Maya's door. Rusty growled low, a warning only Ethan could hear. "Someone's watching us," Ethan murmured, tension flickering across his face. He moved to stand protectively by Maya's bed, placing one steadying hand on Rusty's head. Maya felt her old training kick in, adrenaline sharpening her thoughts. She pressed the call button, asking Olivia to let security know. Olivia's response was swift and unflappable. She relayed the message, then appeared in the doorway with two security guards, both tall, broad-shouldered, and wary. One, a young black man named Devin with sharp cheekbones and a reassuring baritone. The other, an older, grizzled retiree called Hank with a limp and a fondness for crossword puzzles. Devin checked the hall, making brief eye contact with the stranger, who quickly tucked his phone away and vanished into the stairwell. The moment passed, but Maya's sense of isolation deepened. As dusk settled over the hospital, Maya looked at Ethan and Rusty, her only real allies now. She was acutely aware of the gap between herself and her colleagues, the rumors swirling about police corruption, and the sense that someone inside the department might want her silenced. "You two," she said, voice trembling only slightly. "I trust you." More than anyone else right now, Ethan managed a shy smile, as if unused to being needed. Rusty, sensing the solemnity, licked her hand with a gentle patience that only dogs possess. That night, Maya lay awake, listening to the muffled sounds of the hospital and the low, reassuring snore of Rusty on the floor. She replayed every detail, every face, every threat, every odd silence in her mind, determined to unravel the web closing around her. Ethan dozed in the chair, one hand resting on Rusty's flank, ready for whatever might come next. A week had passed since Maya awoke in her hospital bed, but the bruises beneath her skin and the cold suspicion lingering in her mind were slow to heal. The world outside had shifted from blizzard to heavy, relentless rain, washing Brattleboro's streets and alleys in a ceaseless gray that seemed to press secrets from the city's every corner. Discharged with orders for rest she did not intend to obey, Maya met Ethan and Rusty at the police station one bleak afternoon, determined to pursue answers no matter the risks. Ethan, bundled in a faded flannel shirt and worn jeans, looked anxious but resolved, his face thinner and eyes sharper than before. Rusty, ever vigilant, circled Maya's legs before sitting at attention beside her, tail motionless, waiting for the next command. The Brattleboro PD building was utilitarian and cramped, its walls lined with faded commendation plaques and the scent of burnt coffee. Inside the detective's bullpen, Maya introduced Ethan and Rusty to her old friend Detective Tom Martinez, a lean, dark-skinned man in his mid-30s, sharp eyes set deep beneath arched brows, his curly hair cut close to his scalp. Tom wore a threadbare sports jacket and perpetually carried a battered notepad, his fingers always in motion, tapping or drumming on the desk. He had the dry wit of a man who'd seen too much and learned to laugh at pain. "This your civilian task force?" he quipped to Maya, offering Ethan a respectful handshake and Rusty a wary but friendly smile. "You're the hero dog, huh?" "Don't tell the K-9 unit." They gathered in the small conference room, a patchwork of maps and photos covering the walls. Maya, her movements stiff from injury but her voice clear, outlined the evidence. The glove, the shell, the unknown man in the brown coat, the fake doctor, and now the unnerving feeling of being watched. "We're missing something," she insisted, pacing the scuffed linoleum floor. "Who knew my route that night? Who would want me gone badly enough to risk killing me in a hospital bed?" Tom's eyes narrowed. "Someone smart, someone who's got connections both on the street and in the system." Rusty, restless, prowled the room, nose to the ground. He paused by the corner near the radiator, sniffing intently at a scrap of blue fabric, unnoticed until now. Ethan knelt beside him, examining the cloth. "Uniform wool," Ethan noted. "Police issue, but cut wrong for a patrolman." Maya's pulse quickened. "Someone from inside?" Tom made a note, his lips pursed. They split up the tasks. Maya and Tom would check the shift logs for hospital staff and review body cam footage. Ethan would sift through the city's traffic camera feeds for any clues. Rusty, of course, would continue his hunt, guided by instincts sharper than any computer. The rain hammered the station's windows, setting a steady, anxious rhythm. In the archives room, a cave of dust and fluorescent flicker. Ethan sat hunched before a battered monitor, toggling through camera clips from the night of the crash. He paused on one frame, a silver sedan idling 2 blocks from the crash site, windows fogged, driver's silhouette just visible. Rewinding, he caught a clearer shot, male, broad-shouldered, wearing a tailored coat. He printed the image, feeling his heart stutter. Meanwhile, Maya and Tom met with the hospital's night supervisor, Mrs. Dolores Fry, a petite, hawk-eyed woman in her 60s with a cloud of silver hair and a reputation for ruling her domain with a velvet fist. Dolores pulled up the staff logs, pursing her lips. "We had a temp fill in that night, Doctor. Leonard Grant. Registered with an agency, never worked here before, nobody's seen him since." She leaned in, voice lowering. "His credentials were real, but the agency's address? Empty lot on Main." Tom's gaze hardened. He knew exactly what he was doing. Returning to the station, Maya found Rusty at her desk, nose buried in a trash can. He pulled out a crumpled latex glove and a napkin with a faint chemical odor, sharp, sweet, unmistakably acetone. Maya lifted the items gingerly. "Someone tried to clean up," she muttered. Tom looked over her shoulder. Sloppy for a pro, but maybe he got interrupted. That evening, as dusk blurred the town's edges, Maya, Ethan, Tom, and Rusty met again in the parking lot. Thunder boomed overhead, rain slashing the asphalt. "The silver sedan," Ethan said, holding up the printout. "Registered to Jonathan Price. Remember him?" Maya's face tightened. "Internal Affairs. I testified against him last year. He was running protection for smugglers." Tom whistled low. "And he's still got friends on the force." Suddenly, Rusty stiffened, ears high. He dashed to the alley behind the building, barking, paws skidding on wet pavement. Maya, Ethan, and Tom followed, the air charged with adrenaline. A figure bolted from the shadows, a tall man in a gray raincoat moving with practiced agility. Price. The chase was on. They tore down Main Street, shoes slapping water, headlights slicing through the storm. Rusty kept pace, undeterred by the torrent, barking with single-minded ferocity. Maya gritted her teeth against the pain in her side. Tom shouted into his radio for backup. Ethan, soaked to the skin, focused only on Rusty's bobbing form ahead. The suspect darted into a construction site, scattering plywood and barrels. Rusty was first to reach him, teeth bared but disciplined, cornering Price against a chain-link fence. Maya and Tom arrived seconds later, weapons drawn but steady. "It's over, Price," Maya called, her voice iron. Price, soaked and wild-eyed, tried to vault the fence, but Rusty lunged, grabbing his coat and yanking him back. Ethan grabbed Price's arm. Tom cuffed him, breath ragged. Police cruisers soon converged, red and blue lights shimmering on the flooded street. Detective Tom, still panting, grinned at Rusty and clapped Maya on the back. "Never seen a dog work like that." Maya managed a tight smile, adrenaline and relief mixing in her veins. Chief Morton arrived, his coat plastered to his frame, congratulating the team. "You got your man," he rumbled, clapping Ethan's shoulder. They watched as Price, handcuffed and defiant, was loaded into a cruiser. Maya exhaled, rain streaming from her hair. Rusty shook himself, flinging droplets everywhere, then leaned against Maya's hip, as if claiming her as his own. For one shining moment, amidst the thunder and flashing lights, she felt not alone, but finally, truly safe. The rain finally relented by sunrise, leaving Brattleboro slick and glimmering in the pale light. After the adrenaline of the night before, there was a hush over the police station, a sense of the whole town holding its breath, waiting for the storm behind the storm to pass. Maya, Ethan, and Rusty spent the morning in the cramped break room, steam rising from chipped mugs of black coffee. Maya's bruises were fading but still visible beneath her shirt collar. She looked tired, her jaw set, but there was a renewed energy about her, as if the victory of catching Price had burned through layers of fear. Ethan looked older in the light, but somehow lighter too, as if the weight he'd carried for so long was slowly lifting. Rusty, damp but alert, lounged at Maya's feet, his head high and ears perked at every sound from the hallway. Detective Tom Martinez arrived early, hair still damp, a new bandage on his knuckles and a gleam of pride in his eyes. "Price isn't talking yet, but his phone's a gold mine," he announced. Maya nodded, quietly grateful for Tom's steadiness. She had trusted him with her life, and he'd never let her down. Chief Morton called the team into his office, a cramped room lined with old awards and framed newspaper clippings. He stood by the window, tall and solid, raincoat draped on a chair, his face carved by years of hard choices. "There's movement tonight," Morton rumbled. "Word is Price's contacts are nervous. If they're going to make a play, it'll be now." He turned to Maya. "You want in?" She met his gaze, chin lifted. "I do. I'm seeing this through." The operation was set for midnight at an abandoned freight warehouse near the river, a place where secrets and stolen goods had passed hands for decades. The night air was sharp and clean, the river swollen and black. Morton orchestrated the sting with quiet authority, moving officers like chess pieces. His right hand was Captain Jada Stone, a tall black woman in her 40s with broad shoulders, close-cropped hair, and a calm, tactical presence. Jada's cool efficiency was matched only by her dry sense of humor. She greeted Ethan with a nod, offered Rusty a treat, and briefed Maya without a wasted word. Maya, nerves taut but mind clear, went in undercover, wired and shadowed by Tom and Ethan from a distance. She wore a plain brown jacket and jeans, a ball cap pulled low. Ethan lingered in the shadows outside the lot, a battered phone pressed to his ear, while Rusty lay silent at his side, muscles tense, breath steaming in the cold. Their target was Trevor Klein, the mastermind Price had protected, a corpulent man in a tailored suit, his cheeks ruddy, his eyes cold and shrewd behind rimless glasses. Klein, nearly 50, had grown up in Brattleboro, son of a crooked contractor, and he wore his money in gold cufflinks and Italian shoes. With him was Vance, his driver lanky, nervous, scarred along his jaw, and two other men Maya recognized as local muscle, both built like linemen and wrapped in oversized coats. The deal was already in motion, crates loaded with electronics and unmarked bags, voices hushed and tense. Maya stepped forward, hands in her pockets, every sense on edge. Klein glanced at her, his smile thin. "You're late," he said, voice oily. Maya shrugged, playing her part. "Traffic. You got the stuff?" Before Klein could reply, a siren wailed in the distance, and chaos erupted. Tom and a SWAT team pouring in, floodlights slicing the dark, Morton's voice booming orders. Klein's men scattered, but Maya stood her ground. Klein, desperate, lunged at her, a switchblade flashing in his fist. Rusty, bounding from the shadows, intercepted him with a fierce, disciplined leap, knocking Klein off balance. Maya spun and swept Klein's legs, sending him crashing to the ground. In the confusion, Vance made a break for the parking lot, Ethan chasing after him, his boots skidding in the mud. Vance turned, wild-eyed, brandishing a metal pipe. Ethan hesitated until Rusty appeared at his side, barking a warning. Vance backed down, dropping the pipe as officers cuffed him. As backup arrived, Maya moved to check the perimeter. The lot was nearly empty when she heard a scuff behind her, a hulking figure emerging from between the trucks. One of Klein's men, taller and heavier than she remembered, barreled toward her. Maya drew her sidearm, but he was too quick, sending her sprawling to the concrete. The man raised a crowbar. Rusty appeared in a flash, snarling, launching himself between Maya and the attacker. Teeth met wrist. The crowbar clattered away. Tom and Jada arrived a heartbeat later, subduing the man as Rusty stood protectively over Maya, teeth bared, hackles high. When the dust settled, the warehouse was swarming with blue uniforms, evidence bags, and crime scene tape. Klein and his men were hauled away, Morton watching with grim satisfaction. "It's over," he said, clapping Maya on the shoulder. "You did it." "You all did," Maya, still catching her breath, smiled weakly at Ethan and Tom, tears prickling her eyes. Rusty sat beside her, tail thumping, as if nothing extraordinary had happened. Sarah Mallory, the curly-haired local reporter, slipped in at the edge of the scene, notebook in hand, raincoat flapping. She caught Morton's eye. "Any statement?" Morton just shook his head. "Tonight, let the truth speak for itself." They gathered for a moment in the quiet. Maya, Ethan, Rusty, Tom, Jada, Morton, an unlikely family forged by fire and loyalty. Maya, vindicated and finally free from suspicion, knew her fight was not over. But for tonight, she could breathe. Brattleboro lay hushed beneath a fresh fall of snow, rooftops silvered and streets softened into silence. The police station for once buzzed not with sirens or whispered worry, but with laughter, clinking coffee mugs, and the warmth of a job well finished. In the front lobby, a corkboard was crowded with thank you notes scribbled by neighbors, posted by children, even drawn in crayon by the grateful daughter of one of the men Maya's team had saved. For Maya Bennett, the weight of suspicion had finally lifted. The bruises faded, the scars less tender. She moved with a new ease, her smile now reaching her eyes. Her hair was pulled back in a ponytail, freckles clear against cheeks flushed from the cold, her uniform pressed crisp and proud. She shook hands with the mayor, a short, round man with a booming voice and a gift for public gratitude, and with Captain Jada Stone, who wore her usual dry smile and congratulated Maya with a hug and a few low words meant just for her. "You did it." "Don't let them forget it." Ethan, standing awkwardly in the back, wore his best attempt at formal clothes, a blue shirt slightly too big, clean jeans, his hands rough but steady. His silver-streaked hair was combed back, and for the first time in years he carried himself without shrinking from attention. He had become, in the eyes of the town, a quiet sort of hero. A man whose humility inspired the very people who once passed him by without a second glance. Rusty, by his side, was the star of the ceremony. Someone from the animal rescue had fashioned a red bandana for him, and a local baker had made a cake shaped like a police badge, with a dog treat at the center. Children crowded around, stroking his ears, laughing as he gently sniffed their mittens. Even Chief Morton, who normally reserved affection for people with at least 20 years on the force, knelt to scratch Rusty behind the ears and read the citation. For courage, loyalty, and service above and beyond the call of duty. The room erupted in applause as Rusty barked, tail wagging so hard he nearly knocked over a potted plant. Tom Martinez leaned against the wall, his eyes bright behind his glasses. He'd brought his own family, his wife Maria, short and lively with a quick laugh, and their 2 boys, both with their father's curly hair and mischief. Tom clapped Ethan on the back, offered Maya a wink, and for once seemed content to simply be part of the joy. Sarah Mallory, curly-haired and sharp-eyed, hovered on the edge of the crowd, notebook in hand, but today she just smiled, letting her pen rest. She watched as Rusty received his treat, jotting down the moment not for tomorrow's headline, but for herself, a memory of the night Hope won. After the formalities, Maya and Ethan slipped away from the crowd, finding themselves in the quiet hallway outside the squad room. The air was thick with the smell of coffee and melting snow, the muffled voices of colleagues drifting through the doors. For a long moment they said nothing, just breathed together, sharing the silence that comes after survival. Maya was the first to speak, her voice low but steady. "You know, I spent a long time thinking I had to carry everything alone. That letting someone in meant weakness." Ethan looked down, a crooked smile lifting one corner of his mouth. "I know that feeling," he admitted. "Sometimes it takes almost losing everything to realize what matters." Rusty, sensing the shift, pressed his head into Maya's hand. She scratched his ear and laughed, the sound brighter than it had been all winter. Outside, snowflakes danced in the blue dusk. The 3 of them made their way back through the town, past glowing shop windows and lamplight shimmering on ice. At Ethan's modest cottage white paint peeling, roof patched with tin, but clean and warm, they settled in for the evening. Ethan stoked the old wood stove, the fire casting golden light on the walls. He laid out 3 mugs coffee for himself and Maya, warm broth for Rusty, and settled into his favorite battered armchair. Maya sat cross-legged on the rug, Rusty sprawled between them. She looked around at the simple comfort of the room, the patched couch, the pile of dog toys in the corner, the faded photo of Ethan's daughter above the mantel. She felt an unfamiliar peace settle in her chest, something softer and sweeter than triumph belonging. Ethan watched her, recognizing the moment, and raised his mug. "To second chances," he said. Maya smiled, clinking her cup against his. "And to family, the kind you find when you least expect it." Rusty let out a contented sigh, resting his great head across both their knees. For a while no one spoke. The wind whistled gently outside and the fire crackled, filling the house with warmth and a sense of home. Maya closed her eyes, listening to the heartbeat of the new family they'd made together, unlikely, a little battered but whole. And so, while snow continued to fall quietly beyond the windows, 3 souls who had wandered long and suffered much found their winter sanctuary at last. In the flicker of firelight, they laughed and shared stories until night deepened and all worries faded. The world outside was cold, but in this little house there was hope and warmth and the promise that none of them would ever be truly alone again. Sometimes miracles don't arrive in thunder or lightning. They come quietly, through small acts of courage, loyalty, and love. Perhaps it's not luck or chance, but God's gentle hand at work when broken souls find each other, heal together, and discover family where none was expected. In our everyday lives, it's easy to miss these moments of grace. Maybe you pass by someone who needs help, or maybe you are the one in need. Remember, kindness, faith, and the willingness to show up for each other can change everything. No matter how cold the world may seem, hope and love are always waiting to warm your heart. If this story touched you, share it with someone who needs encouragement. Comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Let's see how far this story of hope can reach. If you believe that miracles can happen, that God can use anyone, no matter how lost, lonely, or broken, to bring light into darkness, subscribe to this channel and join our family of faith. Type Amen in the comments if you want to ask God to bless and protect everyone watching this story, and if you believe in the power of second chances. May God bless you and everyone you love. Keep hope alive, and remember, sometimes the smallest kindness is the greatest miracle of all.